Welcome back to another deep dive. We know you are a lifelong learner, the kind of person who really loves a profound aha moment.
Oh, absolutely.
And you value looking at the world through multiple perspectives. So I want you to imagine that you were standing in a pitch black room.
Okay.
The darkness around you feels heavy. I mean, almost suffocating, right?
Yeah, the complete sensory deprivation.
Exactly. And your first instinct, the deeply human biological instinct we all have, is to shout, to scream at the top of your lungs for someone, anyone, to turn on the lights.
Right. You want to externalize that panic.
But today's source material begins with a pretty brutal truth. Screaming at the dark does not turn the lights on.
It really doesn't.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into an incredibly striking 2020 essay. It's titled, "Let the Sacred Lamp in Your Heart Illuminate Your Road in the Dark." It was written by Su Feng, translated by Kinyu, and edited by Kahir.
It's a heavy title, but it delivers.
It really does. Our mission today is to explore the roadmap this text lays out. It serves as a sort of philosophical survival guide for maintaining your personal integrity when facing extreme despair or just widespread societal corruption.
And it starts right there in that dark room you mentioned.
Yes, in what the text calls the mud of despair. It forces you to immediately abandon the instinct to rage against the injustice of it all, arguing that anger is essentially useless. Okay, let's unpack this.
It is a sobering way to begin, right? Because it strips away our most common coping mechanism.
Yeah.
When we experience that profound level of despair, the fight-or-flight response just kicks in. We want the universe or society to hear our anger and correct the injustice.
We want a manager. We want someone to fix it.
Exactly. But the text immediately neutralizes that outward explosion of energy. It argues that shouting in the mud of despair accomplishes absolutely nothing.
Wow.
It's just a complete waste of your most precious resource, which is your internal focus. Instead, Shufeng forces a radical pivot inward.
Okay, so if we can't shout, what do we do?
The only way out of that mud is to light what the text calls the sacred lamp in your own heart. And this isn't just, a metaphor for a vague sense of optimism.
Like good vibes only.
Right. No, not at all. The text defines this sacred lamp very specifically as your firm belief and your faith. It is the core moral architecture of who you are.
The best way I can picture the sacred lamp is, well, it's like being caught in a massive citywide power outage. Everything is pitch black.
Yeah.
You can stand in the middle of the street and yell at the power grid, but the grid doesn't care. It's broken.
Right, you can't hear you.
The only thing that is going to give you any visibility is if you have one of those emergency hand crank flashlights.
Oh, it's a great analogy.
You have to literally generate the power yourself from within through sheer physical effort. Your arm might burn and it requires constant motion, but it is the only way you get to see the next day in front of you.
And you can't stop cranking.
Exactly. But the text doesn't just tell you to crank the handle. It pairs this instruction with an incredibly severe warning about fear.
It really does.
It argues that if your belief collapses because you start prioritizing your own personal gains or losses, your soul fundamentally darkens. And there is one phrase in the essay that really caught my attention.
Which one?
It says that if you hesitate or wander or even wink at the darkness for self-protection, you might never be able to wash away the stain. You might never re-enter the light.
It's intense.
It is, and I feel the need to push back on the severity. Is a moment of weakness really that permanent? I mean, winking at the darkness sounds like a minor survival tactic.
Like a little compromise.
Right. It's smiling at a corrupt boss so you can keep paying your rent. It's laughing at an inappropriate joke so you aren't ostracized by your community. These seem like tiny, almost necessary compromises. Why does the text treat them as a point of absolute no return?
What's fascinating here is that this is the crux of the text's moral psychology. It isn't treating a wink at the darkness as a minor behavioral slip-up or a polite social fiction.
Oh.
It treats it as a fundamental recalibration of your internal compass. The mechanism of moral compromise, according to this framework, is internal degradation.
Internal degradation.
Yeah. When you wink at the darkness for self-protection, when you prioritize your immediate comfort, your social standing, or your financial security over your stated core beliefs, you are actively participating in the collapse of your own faith.
Wow, so you're turning off your own lamp.
Exactly. You are trading your internal light for a temporary external shield.
Yeah.
And the reason this is framed as a potentially permanent stain is because of what it teaches your own subconscious.
What do you mean?
Once you prove to yourself that your foundational beliefs are negotiable when the pressure rises, that internal hand crank generator you mentioned loses its tension.
The gears start to slip.
Yes, you have demonstrated to yourself that the sacred lamp can in fact be turned off if the price is right or the fear is high enough. That changes the very texture of your soul.
But relying solely on that internal hand crank generator assumes you are isolated in a vacuum. I mean, the reality is you aren't just sitting in a dark, empty room.
No, usually you're not.
You are standing in the middle of a screaming crowd, and the text recognizes that this external pressure is the ultimate threat to your lamp.
It sets up this monumental test of integrity.
Right, against the consensus of the entire world. Here's where it gets really interesting. The text demands absolute adherence to taking facts as the basis and law as the criterion.
Which sounds incredibly grounded on its face.
It does, but then it lists the forces you have to ignore to maintain those facts. You have to ignore the clamor of the media, dismiss pervasive gossip, and reject lying and cheating, even if it is happening on a global scale.
Global scale, yeah.
It even says you have to hold your ground if heads of government around the world are supporting a lie, and if celebrities and the wealthy are in high spirits celebrating it.
It's a massive ultimatum.
It really is. It says it is better to die on the way to the purest land than to live on the grand road to hell. Do not surrender to lies, fraud, or hegemony.
That's a heavy burden for one person.
Well, it feels like staying at an ultra-luxury resort. The infinity pool is pristine, the buffet is flawless, everyone you admire is lounging at the cabanas, and the government inspectors have given the resort 5 stars.
Sounds nice.
But you secretly know, because you've seen the foundational blueprints, that the entire resort is built on a leaking toxic waste dump.
Oh, man.
You have the facts. But if literal governments, the media, the wealthy, and the public are all aggressively telling you it's safe, isn't it simply human nature to doubt your own blueprints?
Oh, of course.
Doesn't self-gaslighting become almost inevitable when the consensus is that loud?
It absolutely does, which is why the text identifies it as the ultimate stress test. It is a profound psychological friction. And, we should be clear that we are examining this purely through the philosophical lens Su Feng provides.
Right, without endorsing any specific critique of modern institutions or media.
Exactly. What the text is doing is mapping out the sheer gravitational pull of social consensus. It acknowledges that the pressure to conform is overwhelmingly persuasive, especially when backed by power and wealth.
It's hard to be the only one seeing the toxic waste.
Right. The grand road to hell isn't a lonely path. It is paved with social proof and comfort. To survive it, the text demands a radical, almost shocking level of epistemic independence.
But practically speaking, how does a human mind endure that? How do you maintain that independence without just cracking under the pressure?
The text suggests it relies on completely detaching your self-worth and your perception of reality from societal approval.
Okay.
You avoid self-gaslighting by recognizing that social consensus is often inherently transactional. People agree with the crowd to belong, to be safe, or to gain status.
So they aren't even agreeing because it's true.
Often, no. By refusing to play that transaction game, you remove the leverage the crowd has over your reality. If your grasp on facts crumbles just because a celebrity or a politician says otherwise, the text argues you never really held those truths in the first place. You're merely renting the prevailing opinion.
Renting the opinion, wow. But that raises a really dangerous edge case. How does an individual practically differentiate between holding on to genuine objective truth and just falling into their own stubborn delusion?
That's the risk, isn't it?
Right. We see people all the time who isolate themselves, reject all media, reject all government facts, and convince themselves of a reality that is completely false. If you are ignoring everyone, how do you know your sacred lamp is actually illuminating the truth and not just spotlighting your own paranoia?
That is the essential tension in the demand to take facts as the basis and law as the criterion. The text doesn't advocate for chaotic rebellion or creating your own reality out of thin air.
It tethers you to something solid.
Exactly. It tethers the individual to objective, verifiable foundations, facts, and law. The danger you are describing occurs when a person rejects consensus but replaces it with another unverified belief system based on ego or fear.
I see.
True independence, in Shuofeng's framework, requires a rigorous, almost clinical dedication to what can be proven, independent of how many people believe it. It requires extreme humility, not arrogance.
You aren't rejecting the crowd because you are smarter than them.
Right, you're rejecting the crowd because the specific, verifiable facts in front of you contradict their celebration. The text is asking the individual to construct an impenetrable bubble where objective truth heavily outweighs human consensus.
It means embracing total isolation for the sake of the pure land. And that isolation sounds absolutely exhausting.
It really does.
It sounds like the text is demanding you be this superhuman combative martyr, standing in the lobby of the resort screaming about the toxic waste while everyone throws things at you.
Right, which goes back to what we said at the start about shouting.
Yes. If you have to constantly fight the media, the government, and the wealthy just to hold on to the truth, you are going to burn out. But this is where the essay took a massive, unexpected pivot into pragmatism.
I love this part.
It actually acknowledges human frailty. It plainly states, quote, "Your strength might be very weak and you might not be able to change the overall situation."
It gives you an out.
It does. It doesn't demand that you single-handedly fight the whole world. The minimum requirement for survival is surprisingly simple. Do not become an accomplice. Do not shout for the darkness.
Keep your hands clean.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It essentially advises that if you are powerless to stop the lie, just keep silent. Never collaborate. And it adds a crucial caveat. If you don't actually have the facts,
Right.
if you're unsure, keep silent.
Yes. Don't jump to conclusions based on hearsay.
Right, because when the truth eventually surfaces, the regret and shame of having amplified a lie will be crushing. Reading that provided a huge wave of relief.
It takes the pressure off.
It is exactly like being caught in a riptide in the ocean. The worst thing you can possibly do is try to swim directly against the immense power of the water. You will exhaust yourself and drown.
That's the worst instinct.
The text is essentially saying you don't have to possess the strength to fight the entire ocean. You just have to float. Stay quiet, conserve your energy, and most importantly, make sure you aren't actively grabbing onto anyone else and pulling them underwater with you.
Just refuse to participate in the current.
That
We connect this to the bigger picture. The text provides a brilliant synthesis of absolute moral idealism and grounded practical survival tactics.
It's surprisingly realistic.
It is. Philosophical texts often demand a level of heroism that simply isn't accessible to a person living a regular life under immense systemic pressure. Shuofeng recognizes the crushing weight of the overall situation.
Yeah.
In this framework, silence is completely redefined. It is not an act of cowardice, and it's certainly not surrender. It is a strategic, powerful, and active refusal to participate in falsehood.
Because illusions require participation.
Right. Exactly. Societal lies require constant participation to survive. By withholding your voice, by refusing to shout for the darkness or repeat hearsay, you are denying the illusion, the social proof it so desperately craves. You are starving the darkness of your energy.
It's an active non-compliance.
Exactly. And the point about hearsay acts as a protective mechanism. In a chaotic, dark environment, misinformation is rampant. By demanding silence when objective facts are absent, the text protects the individual from accidentally becoming a tool for the very forces they are trying to resist.
It preserves the integrity of the sacred lamp.
Right. You don't have to broadcast your light to the whole world, but you absolutely must not use your voice to blow out someone else's candle through the spread of rumors.
But that brings up a heavy existential question. If your resistance is entirely silent and you are just quietly floating in this riptide, not making a sound, does it even matter? Who notices your silent integrity? If you don't participate but you don't actively fight the system out loud, how does that change anything?
It's a natural fear.
The text anticipates this exact anxiety and provides an answer that completely stopped me in my tracks. It insists that light and justice are eternal. It uses these incredibly poetic phrases like, "The bank of justice has never closed down and the devil has never defeated God."
Those are powerful images.
It states that God watches everyone from the sky, choosing lives for heaven, and then it introduces a concept that forces you to rethink the entire idea of being unseen. It calls it the information retention space.
Yes.
According to the text, this space records absolutely everything without a single omission. Every action, every spoken word, and even our innermost thoughts are captured. The essay points out that people can successfully deceive each other, but they can never deceive God because the information retention space catches it all.
Nothing slips by.
So what does this all mean? It sounds less like a surveillance camera and more like an eternal ledger of reality. Every time you choose silence over a lie, it's an indelible stroke of ink in a book that cannot be burned or rewritten by the crowd.
It's permanent.
But I have to admit, I felt a bit of unease reading it. We live in a world where being surveilled constantly is a reality, and it's deeply uncomfortable. Does the idea of a universal ledger recording our innermost thoughts induce anxiety? Or is it supposed to be comforting?
This raises an important question. That tension really comes from our modern context, where surveillance is almost entirely associated with control, extraction, and punishment.
Right, it feels invasive.
It induces anxiety because human systems of recording are inherently flawed and biased. But within the spiritual framework Feng is building, this information retention space is designed to be the ultimate, profound comfort for those trapped in despair.
How so?
Well, consider the extreme isolation we discussed a moment ago. The person standing entirely alone, holding on to their facts against a global consensus. The true psychological toll of that isolation is the feeling of being erased.
Oh, that makes sense.
If the whole world misunderstands you, ignores you, or actively campaigns against your truth, the human mind begins to believe its own reality no longer exists.
Because if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, did it even happen? If you resist the darkness silently and no one sees it, did your integrity even exist?
Precisely. The information retention space answers that definitively. Yes, it exists and it is known. It guarantees that you are never unseen. It ensures that your silent resistance, your private refusal to compromise your soul, is recorded, validated, and valued eternally.
It's that bank of justice metaphor.
Exactly. It implies that every act of unseen integrity is a deposit into an account that is fully insured by the cosmos itself. The bank is always solvent. You cannot deceive this system with false public relations or media spins.
So the rich and powerful cannot buy their way out of their dark actions.
And the weak and silent cannot be robbed of their light. It operates as the great equalizer. It assures the individual that their internal private reality is actually the most concrete, unalterable reality in the universe.
That reframing changes the entire emotional weight of the text. It takes the act of silence from feeling like a lonely, helpless void and turns it into a direct connection to this eternal ledger. It gives silence immense power.
It really does.
And that realization brings us to the ultimate conclusion of the text. If justice is mathematically guaranteed in the cosmic bank and our primary job is to maintain our internal lamp, how do we actually recognize true light out here in the physical world? And what is the final step for us to take?
The text is very clear on this.
It leaves zero room for ambiguity. Feng provides a definitive, unyielding criteria. True light, the text states, is never power, it is never material wealth, it is never prestige, and it is never represented by the media or public opinion.
Which goes against everything we're taught.
We are so heavily conditioned to associate the spotlight with actual light, to assume that whoever is on the highest stage is generating the most illumination. But the text strips all of those societal markers away.
So what is the true light then?
It says true light is represented only by those who allow people to live and work in peace and contentment without ever seeking their own self-interest. That is the single metric that matters.
Wow.
And then it delivers this incredible call to action. It says, if you do not see the light around you, then become it. The promise attached to that action is massive. It claims that if you become the light, you will be glorified, lifted to heaven, and you will never experience death again.
A total transformation.
You transition from being lost in the mud of despair, totally reliant on your own exhausting hand crank generator, to literally becoming the illumination for the world around you.
The progression the text outlines is remarkably elegant. It guides the reader step by step from the paralysis of despair inward to the cultivation of personal faith, then outward into the silent, strategic resistance against corrupt consensus.
Yeah.
Upward to the reassurance of cosmic justice, and finally it demands a return to the world, not as a victim of the darkness, but as a source of light.
It's a full circle.
It is. And the explicit rejection of power, wealth, and prestige as markers of light is essential to the entire philosophy. Those things are almost always transactional. Acquiring them often requires the very compromises, the winking at the darkness that the text explicitly forbids.
You can't have both.
Right. By defining light solely as selfless action that brings peace to others, the text democratizes salvation. You do not need to be a head of government, a wealthy benefactor, or a celebrity to generate light. You only need to refuse the darkness and foster peace in your immediate surroundings.
And what about that promise of transcending death?
In this philosophical context, that can be understood as the ultimate liberation from fear. Fear of death or fear of loss is what causes the despair in the first place. If your integrity is recorded eternally in the information retention space and you have become a source of selfless light, The transient physical threats of the darkness no longer hold any ultimate power over you.
It really is a stunning roadmap. From sitting in the dark mud, uselessly angry, to becoming the very thing that dispels the darkness for others. And that brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you step back into your day.
What's the thought?
We've talked a lot about resisting the loud, overwhelming crowd to hold on to the truth, but here's something new to consider. What happens if the darkness isn't a malicious, screaming crowd at all, but a perfectly tailored algorithm?
Oh, that's an interesting shift.
In an era where our digital feeds are custom designed to tell us exactly what we want to hear, to keep us comfortable, how do you know if your sacred lamp is actually illuminating objective truth or just reflecting your own bias back at you?
The echo chamber effect.
Exactly. How do you calibrate your internal compass when the darkness is disguised as comfort and endless agreement? Think about how you can practice the power of silence, not just against the things you hate, but perhaps against the digital echoes that are a little too eager to agree with you.
That's a great challenge.
Because the moment you stop relying on the external grid to tell you what is real, you can start turning that generator yourself. Keep that sacred lamp lit. We will catch you on the next deep dive into the source material.